supply chain to include the design professionals, the engineers and the architects, trying to figure out how to encourage them to choose glass over things like brick. Obviously, we're advocating glass. So some of the things that occupy my day-to-day, and I think you know, my title is a bit vague, and that is also because I don't do one specific thing, and I actually like it that way. I like dipping my toe in across the different departments in our company, and what I get to engage in. So that includes member benefits and getting members involved on committees and task groups. I do some content creation for our website, glass.org. I do have some management over all of our social media accounts. I work closely with our technical and advocacy team. We have 2 engineers on staff. So to help execute and promote the technical resources and webinars that we produce. We have American Institute of Architects. We are a CE provider for AIA, so we are constantly trying to create and update education for architects on why they should use glass. And then finally, I also kind of oversee the NGA has 5 educational events and conferences. So I kind of act as project manager, overseeing the overall production of the event and, you know, keeping things on track with folks who are working on logistics and speakers and all of that. So, but this is where it all started. And this is where you'll see the first Rotary Alert flag. I tried to put some of these in here as it shows that our community is small and there are a lot of touch points along the way. But I began working with GANA in 2006, the Glass Association of North America, which also owned a for-profit subsidiary association management company. And so that subsidiary is specifically what I worked for. And I have to thank Ashley Sherrist for letting me know of that opportunity. I don't know if you know, Ashley and I are both Washburn grads and are both also Kappa Alpha Theta sorority alums. So the time I came to graduate, she let me know of an opening at her work at the time. And so we were coworkers for several years as well. And then eventually GANA kind of shed its for-profit arm so we could focus solely on glass. And then in February of 2018, GANA combined with the National Glass Association. So that's how we got to where we are now. And with that combination, we closed our in-person office that was at 8th and Jackson. This was Gary, our accountant at the time in 2018. And so moved to an at-home office full-time with my new office mate, Bella. And she's been my water cooler buddy for a little over 2 years now, and she's very good at expressing what elements of my job interest her and what don't. But now, so we are the National Glass Association with GANA. You can see that in the logo in the top left. And we retained that in large part because GANA had a long history of code and technical resource development that we wanted to make sure wasn't lost, essentially, and to assure the industry that the resources they continue to use are still relevant and applicable. So while GANA's wheelhouse was more heavy on technical and education, NGA also had a trade show, Glass Build America, and its own magazines, Glass Magazine and Window and Door Magazine. So in many respects, this combination helped level out each association's strengths, and we get to have it all now. So NGA's vision on the screen. We just created this a couple years ago, but I do like it, and we envision a future in which glass is the material of choice to enhance spaces where people live, play, learn, work, and heal. And so I am biased, but when I say glass has so many benefits depending on the need and goals of a building, daylight and view have big impacts on mental health, on focus and education performance in schools, and even physical healing during hospital stays. It can accomplish all of this while keeping you safe from the elements, both by regulating temperature and providing protection from forced entry, fire, or even excessive noise. There's electrochromic glass that can be dimmed with a switch. There's glass that can darken when exposed to UV and sunlight. And there's glass that can help reduce the amount of bird collisions and deaths they experience when they see themselves. I'm sure this has happened in your own kitchen windows, but this happens in big buildings as well. I had no idea I'd become as passionate about glass, but the more you are exposed to it, the more you realize there's literally a glass for that. And you may recognize the bottom left photo is from the Prairie, I totally spaced it, the Prairie Fire Museum that's down in Olathe. Several of our members worked on that, but that's a great example of unique decorative glass as well. So in terms of resources, I mentioned we have 2 magazines. We also produce technical papers, technical manuals, and we have an online training platform, My Glass Class, as well. I did get to do a bit of travel with my job, usually taking between 5 to 8 trips a year. Nothing excessive, but enough to keep things interesting. And I guess for those who care, Southwest is my airline of choice. However, this year has been different, and we've now moved or are moving at least 3 of our in-person events to online-only formats. So what's on the screen is just an example of the NGA Glass Conference that we held in late July. It was our first foray at this. Hosting educational like this one's, we spent 3 days doing this. And then from the flip side, I felt very techie with my moderator setup, but it definitely changed the experience. It's interesting going through a conference like this basically by yourself when you're used to being surrounded by people. We did try to lean into the uniqueness of meeting virtually by creating a set of collectible funnies, as we call them. We mostly use them on social media primarily, but we again promoted them as collector's items leading up to the event. Be sure to get them all. And then we asked people in a poll what their favorite or most relatable funny was, depending on what their home situation was. So it was just a fun way to engage with the audience and also talk about something that wasn't serious for a moment. On a typical year, NGA, like I said, hosts 5 educational events. The Building Envelope Contractors Conference, the BEC, as well as 2 glass conferences, which are our smaller technical meetings, 1 trade show, and 1 other small Glazing Executives Forum conference. So building envelope contractors, I know sounds kind of strange, but when you think of a building envelope, you think of the skin. These are the people that are installing the glass on the outsides of the building. Is essentially what that means. The glass is enveloping the building. So these photos are just from earlier this year in March. We hosted our largest BEC conference in a decade, bringing almost 700 people to Nashville. Kind of funny how that we reach our peak and then we reach our low in a matter of a month. But while we were there, the coronavirus was just being whispered about. So we had a few extra bottles of hand sanitizer on hand, but that was about it. What impacted us more was the tornado that hit Nashville the second night of our event. Many of our folks got to experience the hotel's emergency protocols, and some were finding shelter while still out at the honky tonks. The BEC conference is heavy on education and also includes a non-industry speaker, so usually a former athletic star, and I thought this could be fun trivia moment to see if you can guess who these folks are who I've gotten to meet over the years. I know if you want to shout it out, you can, but I'll also just tell you. So Jim Morris is on the far left. He's the original rookie, played by Dennis Quaid in the 2002 Disney film. Johnny Bench is in the center. He was a catcher mostly in the 70s for the Cincinnati Reds. Had a lot of success during his time playing. And then Mark Eaton on the far right is a 7'4" center for Utah Jazz in the 1980s. And obviously that's a pretty telling picture when I'm 5'8" standing next to him and you still look like an ant. But that's always neat. So glass conferences we host twice a year. We draw around 115 people for these. And as you can see, we sit around a U shape with our computers looking at screens, and these are more working or technical meetings. But the glass conference that we typically hold in the first quarter of the year also has some special elements to it. A fun run. This is not the caliber of our pumpkin run, so this kind of puts this one to shame. This is the most basic sense of a fun run. There are no awards, but bragging rights. We have an awards reception and then a golf scramble typically, and in past years we've taken the proceeds from the scramble and donated them to a local agency to where we're meeting, whether that's a shelter or food bank or whatnot, just to support the local economy we're meeting in. And finally, I mentioned trade shows. We not only host our own Glass Build America, which drew about 8,400 people last year, but we also attend select trade shows, including this one. This was at the American Institute of Architects last summer, which that was kind of a fun exhibit. These are some of my coworkers, and I've heard mentioned a couple of times that because working for a national association, we used to be based in Topeka, and I am based here, but there's really no chance you might really see our impact in Topeka, nor would you ever really get to meet my coworkers. So these are some of them, and just for a sampling of demographic, Karen and Irma in the top left, I'm very close with, and Karen lives in Karen lives in Reno and Irma lives in Plano. Max and Andrew are always up for antics. And then, and this is a set of other coworkers. Our president and CEO, Nicole, is here in the black jacket. I obviously missed the memo that this was not the funny face picture, so that was my bad. And ironically, of all the pictures that were taken, our editor, Nora, on the far left, chose this one to post on Twitter. So I still am wondering what did I do to deserve that? But nonetheless, it happens. So moving on, time check here. So this next section is a little bit random, but I find really interesting as well. History and forensics, and just ways that glass can be answering some questions, mythbusters a bit, I guess. So we have a longtime consultant in the industry who did a story last month on how he was invited to investigate the windshield of the car from the JFK assassination. So essentially it was, the title of the presentation was the glass evidence for a second shooter. So a few years back, he was invited to the Smithsonian to essentially review the windshield, and luckily they had stored it properly so the existing crack did not worsen while it was there. And so, this big square is representing the windshield. It was a piece of laminated glass, so it's two pieces of glass with an interlayer, and then direction of travel on the street. So obviously the speculation that called him back in was that the car had a round bullet hole in the front of the windshield, and does this mean that the president was also shot at from the front? The Warren Commission had previously determined that no, there was only one shooter, but we know that that's still been debated to this day. So the short story is that he got a similar windshield and created a test protocol that he ran multiple tests using a slingshot and a metal ball to try to resimulate a bullet hit. And these were his conclusions. There was no surface impact, there's no conspiracy. The Warren findings are correct, but on our end, even though they neglect to give a detailed description of the laminated glass breakage. So, if there was a bit more detail on why it was the way it was, the speculation may not have remained. And also, the glass didn't break for 30 or plus years because it wasn't stressed, it was stored properly. So, next question I actually got a couple weeks ago was about the kind of the antique glass, the cathedral glass. Why is it thicker on the bottom than the top? And when glass is made, it does begin as a liquid before it's hardened. And so does that mean that glass creeps? And that's essentially the notion here, that in the medieval cathedral windows, does the glass creep or flow downward over time? And in fact, it's actually due to the lack of modern machinery back in the day, that it was hard to make it truly flat, because they used a spinning disc called a glass crown disc. So even when you think of spreading things out and spinning, it gets thinner at the edges than it is in the center. So when they would cut the glass off the wheel, it would be thicker on one end. So purely for the sake of stability, they would put the glass in with the thicker edge on bottom, for safety and stability. So I hope that answers a couple more questions on that. So now this is where kind of the fun part continues, and I will say you've already gotten a lot of photos, but you're going to get a lot of photos now. But it's the best way, I think, to describe the opportunities, I guess, with glass. And I have a couple videos, so hang in there with me if they work or don't work. But at an international trade show we attended 2 years ago, there's a section on the floor that displays really outside the box thinkings, and essentially the fruits of a lot of engineering work. So this is a 10-meter long, 1.3 ton glass seesaw that sits on just one acrylic swivel, essentially. So there had to be 2 of us on that end to balance out the weight. But nonetheless, you can see in the video, the people in the center are primarily concerned with how this is actually working. And this is just a cross section of what they're looking at. So this is all glass with one little acrylic swivel there. You can climb a glass climbing wall. This is all glass, just with the footholds or whatever they're called mounted on the glass. You can swing on a glass swing. It's a glass seat supported by glass tubes with metal joints. And then you can also glide down a glass slide that's mounted to the exterior of a building. The only time I've gotten to go to the Grand Canyon was on a trip with our member. We actually got to go with them and learn about the glass that was installed on the skywalk. And this skywalk, hopefully, I think you've probably seen about it, but it extends 70 feet out over the rim of Eagle Point on the west edge of the canyon. But we got to learn about literally the glass and how it's supporting us, and also what happens when it cracks and how they replace it. It doesn't happen very often. And know that it is extremely thick. So even if, one thing you will know or come to know, when in terms of glass in flooring, there's typically, it's called a sacrificial light. So know that even if the top piece cracks, it's meant to be the sacrificial light, understanding it's being supported by many more layers beneath it. Same goes for the Willis Tower skybox. Here, you get to play with some technology on the right. And then, of course, when you hold a meeting in a city nicknamed the Glass City, you get to enjoy 2 hobbies at one time, glass and beer. At our trade show last September, we worked with our members to create some interactive elements within our booth. Again, all of the materials were donated and collaborated to build a glass ping pong table and also glass cornhole boards. And occasionally I do get to go on a job site tour. Ironically, these were both taken in Nashville. So if you ever stay at the JW Marriott or the new Grand Hyatt that just opened, you'll have to let me know. Because in these particular pictures, they were both still under construction. But it's our member here taking us around and teaching us about the glass that's being used. And then what eventually happens when you work in the glass industry, I'm sure other industries exhibit similar behaviors with when you become ingrained, but you may be going out for a walk or a meal and you just can't help but stop and look at the glass or the hardware or the sealants. Getting on the floor is normal to get a good look. What starts as a fun picture among colleagues with a view turns into a blurry background with a focus on the bubbles in the interlayer of that laminated glass. And I believe those are the lovely Hollywood Hills back there, but this photo is showing you the edge of a double laminated glass light. Glass airport displays and glass memorials are also fair game. The photo on the left here is actually the glass floor in the balcony of the library in our own state capitol, very old um, or, display of glass flooring. The Glass Labyrinth exhibit was at the Nelson Atkins a few years ago. And then damage to a storefront on Mass Street in Lawrence just a few weeks ago are all things that will catch your eye and interest when you're in the glass industry. And then getting to make your own glass paperweight is also extra cool. And this is up at More Than Lemons in Holton, if you're interested. So now the extracurriculars, I have no clue where I'm at slide-wise, so I will speed this up. Hopefully you got a decent taste of the glass industry. There are some times when my work actually bleeds into my extracurricular activities. So I've literally left and flown from a meeting to a tennis tournament before, even in my work garb. And here's the beginning of another Rotary alert. So tennis. I've been asked a lot about tennis, and it is a big part of my life. I started playing, I think, in middle school, took about a 10-year break, and then started up about 8 years ago. But I've been asked a few times about what this adult tennis is all about. So I'll give you a quick snapshot of what the USTA, United States Tennis Association League play entails. We are lucky to have a great tennis community here in Topeka. And so know that though I'm talking about league tennis, that is not the only way to get involved in play. So to play on a league, first you need a rating. That's based on your past play experience. So as you can see in the photo in the top right, it might be kind of hard to see, but we're playing in a 4-0 women's tournament. We were all 4-0 rated players at that time. And this is important and helpful because it makes tennis for adults fun and competitive and isn't based on age alone. And when you play as a youth, all of the tournaments you might play in are based on age. You're in the 14-year-old bracket, 16-year-old bracket. That goes away with adult tennis, and it's just purely based on your rating. And then I typically play in 2 to 3 leagues a year, but kind of like Hunger Games, the USTA is divided into sections and districts. This is how we look. So we're in the Kansas district, range from 2 to 4 teams that play, but we are a part of the larger Missouri Valley section, this whole blue area comprised of 10 districts. So the goal when starting a league is to win your district. And when you do that, you get to go to sectionals. So you'll go to a tournament and play people from Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, St. Louis, etc. The goal when you go to sectionals is to win sectionals. So in that regard, you would then make it to nationals. There are 17 sections across the country. So nationals, not all the time do all sections show up, whether they just don't have a team or they choose not to go for any reason. But the goal then at nationals is you play people who won their other sections. So you get to meet people from literally all across the country. Here's another Rotary alert. Tim Swope has joined us on a few trips, and he's also one of my tennis partners this summer. I think we only actually got to play once, but we are 1-0, so we have a winning record together. Moving outside of tennis, the logos on the screen are just kind of a snapshot of some organizational involvement and service that I do currently. Family Service and Guidance Center, I serve on the foundation, board of trustees, obviously Rotary. I'll move on from that slide. Another random fact about me is that I love children's books. And when I started traveling for work, it became a goal of mine to find a children's book from the places I visited. And at some point in time, I was looking around and realized Topeka doesn't really have a good children's book. So this has evolved into me wanting to write one. It is a big step with me sharing this with you because only a few folks know, and I'm very slowly working towards it. But this one will hopefully be about Cyrus K. Holliday. If there's anyone who likes to sample new beers like Bob Carmichael, I'm obviously enjoy taste testing beers, especially from microbreweries out of state. And I think at one point we had discussed holding our own beer tasting, so hopefully we can make that happen one day. I've also grown to enjoy airplanes and flying, thanks to my dad's influence early on. And a highlight of Leadership Topeka last year was getting to take a flight on the 190th Air Refueling Wing Stratotanker. That's this picture. I actually got to sit in the cockpit at takeoff, and then also got to watch them refuel some fighter jets. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everyone how exciting it is that we're getting an air show back here next summer. So please don't forget about that. Let's see, music. I'm going to blow through some of this quickly. I am very slowly learning to teach myself how to play the electric bass guitar currently, thanks to a loan that I got from a coworker. But before that, I grew up playing a bit of piano, but spent most of my time playing the clarinet in symphony and marching band, and always enjoy music recommendations. Bike riding, hiking. Here's another Rotary alert. I think you all know Alicia and I hiked the Inca Trail in Peru a few years ago. So I do enjoy getting out and about. I moved into my house about 5 years ago and became obsessed with the brick on my back patio. This is buffalo brick. Upon more research, it turns out it's quite historic, but it was made in a plant in Buffalo, Kansas, northeast of Wilson Lake in Wilson County. Other collectors like Ray Beers and Alan Bradbury around town have also commented about this brick and other historic brick in Topeka. And finally, my family. My parents are Bill and Nancy, both Topeka West grads and Topeka natives. I also get the pleasure of being their only child. My dad is a member of the Downtown Rotary Club and has been since 1988. So my first exposure to Rotary was attending the annual Christmas lunch hosted at the Ramada. And so it always included a photograph by their Christmas tree. And so now we have 31 of these photos to look back on each holiday season. And finally, I cannot forget to acknowledge our furry companion, Sadie, at my parents' house, and Bella, you met my office mate earlier. So that is it. I'm sorry I was so long-winded, but thank you for taking this journey with me.
Sara, thank you. That's awesome. My knowledge of glass is a little more clear now.
Good pun. Good pun.
I'm sorry, you had to do it. Welcome, Bill and Nancy. Glad to have you with us to watch your daughter enlighten Topeka South Rotary. That's awesome. I also wanted to make sure that I reminded you that Pumpkin Run, get people signed up. Topeka High School Trunk or Treat, make sure that if you feel or you have the availability, please help them out. And contact me and I can get you in contact with Kelm Lear. Make sure you're looking at number 24 in Boston. Hope he comes back with a sore arm. It is Denver in New England. We want to see a lot of flags. Other than that, all right, let's go ahead and do the four-way test. First of all, does anybody have anything else they'd like to share?
One other thing there, Jim. There was a question out there about the registration for the district conference that it shows that it's closed. Jamie put in the chat there that there is going to be a new link, a new registration link coming out today, so people can register for the Zoom version.
Awesome. Thank you, Governor Barr. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start our wonderful weekend with the four-way test. Of the things we think
say or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Will be beneficial to all concerned?
And is it
fun?
Awesome. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah.